So I will call this meeting to order at 4:33 p.m. We'll start with roll call. Daniel Krim is absent. Jen Hanks.
Here.
Kevin Hayes.
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Estella Hollander.
Here.
I believe we're not expecting Kai Kelly. I'm here. Sam Meyer. Valerie Pyatt.
Here.
Awesome. Okay, on the city staff side, Martin Ince.
I'm here.
Great. Jeff Bauman. Absent. Carlton Johnson.
I'm here.
Chris Fair.
Present.
Kevin, how do I say his last name? Rube? Roib? Roib? Rube? I don't know. Adam Williams? Rube? Okay, Adam Williams. All right, and then we have a couple other folks. Would you all like to introduce yourselves real fast? Just say your name.
Matt Mitchell here.
Hi, Matt.
Hi.
I also saw Matt in the wild on a bike like a week ago.
We were in the wild.
All right, and Kim, I see you're here. Kim
here.
Austin. Cool.
I'm here. Hi.
Hello, welcome. For preliminary general business, now we have a moment for members of the BAC to make any announcements. If you have an announcement, indicate so somehow. Okay. Seeing no announcements, does anyone from the public have comment?
I
Seeing
have
none,
one.
you can-
Hey, I'll make
You
a
do?
comment real quick.
Okay,
I just
go
want
ahead,
to
Matt,
say
and then Kim.
I've really been in a comment for the public. I speak for the public, and I was just wanted to say the nice asphalt patches we got out on the Foots Trail are pretty incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Kim?
Hey, I have been told or given some feedback. The truck drivers on the part of Route 66 kind of by the mall. It's frustrating when they park in the bike or on that shared use path or in the bike lane, and it's really hard to use it. That's all I'm supposed to convey. It's when they like park overnight and stuff.
Tim, could you start that first part again? What was the location, and did you say was it semi trucks?
Yeah, the
Okay.
semi trucks when they park kind of over, by the bridge, under the bridge. Like, what's that? It's the old Route 66.
Yeah. Hi, Kim. This is Kevin Hayes. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's right near the secondhand store down at the bottom of the mall there. There's just an open area where I think that the trailers were staying before by the Butler exit freeway, but now they've closed that off for them, and so they're going to that spot. And it is difficult for sure to ride on that road, or for cars to see you when you're biking in that bike path. That's that raised path. Those trucks are there too. So.
All right, any other comments? Thank you, Kim and Matt. Okay, so that takes us to old business, which is the draft Regional Plan 2045 review and adoption process. And I believe Martin has slides.
We have slides.
I see them.
Do
I
you?
do see your presenter view. I don't know if you want that or not.
Oh, yeah, that's Is this okay? I don't know how to get rid of that. How to switch the screen in that presenter view. Kim, do you know how?
No, but I just thought of one more thing that I wanted to say, and I'm sorry. Am I loud?
Go ahead, Kim. Martin will work on his slides.
Okay, I'm stalling for Martin. I just wanted to mention that Carlton, Chris, and I are teaching a bike education class, bike safety class for older adults, and it's starting. It's a series, and it's starting Wednesday, the 17th, and it's on Wednesdays. It's 4 Wednesdays from 10 to 12. The first 3 classes are in class. It's at the Adult Center. And the last one is on bike. You need a helmet and a bike and need to know how to ride. And we're just going to go through the rules of the road and some considerations older adults may face. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. If folks are interested in that, where would they find more information?
I would be happy to share a flyer with Martin, or they can call the Adult Center and sign up there.
I think a flyer would be great. Okay, anything else before the regional plan now that the slides look beautiful and perfect? Great.
Thanks for
Okay.
the stall, Kim. That was perfect. Okay, so this is our main agenda item tonight. And the reason we called this meeting, we are in the city that is in the last kind of moments of getting the regional plan adopted. You all spent a considerable amount of time on this document last December, I believe, and submitted a robust set of comments. The document has been revised since then, so there's a public hearing draft, which has been available for a couple of weeks, even a couple of months. This slide shows the final review schedule. There are 2 public hearings scheduled before the Planning and Zoning Commission. One was last night at the Alcoplex. The next one is coming up for the 24th. Both of them will follow the same format. We didn't have any comments in time for the meeting last night, but we have an opportunity to have comments in time for the next public hearing. The draft will go, the Planning and Zoning Commission will make a recommendation on the draft. It will then go to City Council, tentatively scheduled for October 9th. That's another public hearing. The City Council will vote on it. If they vote to approve it, it goes to a citizen vote in May of 2026. And I believe that will be a write-in election, a write-in vote only. So any questions on that process? I think the next slide will talk about kind of the format for making comments, but I'll pause to see if there's any questions on the plan itself or on that process. Okay, so last time we reviewed, we made comments as a committee. So Sam did a lot of work organizing them. You guys had a lot of good conversation about what the comments should include, and they were sent in. And in a few moments here, we'll look at how they were incorporated or answered in the draft plan. If you want, you can also submit comments as just as individuals, as citizens. You can indicate that you serve on the Bike Advisory Committee, but you can't indicate that you represent the Bike Advisory Committee. If we understand that distinction, and even if we do decide to send in comments as a group, you're still welcome to send in comments as a citizen as you see fit. So we don't have to decide this now. We can kind of go through the review and the document, and then decide at the end if it seems like you want to take one path or the other. We do have our next regular meeting next week on the 18th. So we don't have to finish comments tonight. We can get a draft together and we can put it back on the agenda next week. And then we still have time to submit them before the 24th. I will say that that the plan has been through a couple of drafts. When we submitted comments last, our comments went to the city staff, long-range planning staff. And they worked with those comments and worked to incorporate them. This time around, given where we are in the process, your comments are going directly to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So it will really be up to the Planning and Zoning Commission to decide if they want to incorporate any revisions that we suggest via our comments. And then further, will be up to the City Council to decide if they want to have the plan modified to incorporate those comments. So because we're at a different point in the process, there's a slightly higher bar regarding our comments and the likelihood that they will be incorporated into the draft plan. So any questions or comments on that? I just wanted to be kind of clear about that. In other words, it's not like a good time to be wordsmithing or suggesting that the overall policies be changed, for example, because those have been under development for going on 3 years now, I think. So, but there is an opportunity to make other changes, and I think we'll kind of see as we go through the document where those opportunities lie. And I'm gonna turn it back to Sam and ask if she's been pretty heavily involved with review of the document and helping to draft comments. So I'm going to turn it to her for her comments.
Sure, thanks, Martin. So if you all saw in the agenda, one of the attachments that Martin sent was the responses to our comments from the folks involved in the regional plan. So I read through those and then I compared the previous draft from 2024 to this draft to see what changes were made. Overall, what I would say to y'all, in case you haven't gotten to do a deep dive, is that many of the policies remain the same, but they have been reorganized or restructured. So if you were to look at the two drafts side by side, it looks quite different, but that is in part just because the policies have been moved. A primary point of feedback that we got for our previous comments was essentially that the comments were too detailed for this type of document, and that some of the things that we wanted to see or were interested in would be more appropriate for a strategic or programmatic plan, like the ATMP or a different planning document. Some changes that we requested were made for policies. For example, we had talked about bicycle parking, and there's a new policy about bicycle parking. Some other language was changed related to safety versus accessibility or comfort. Some definitions that we requested were added, others were not. Interestingly to me, in my feeling, our suggestion that the plan define who vulnerable road users are and specify that vulnerable road users are non-motorists was not incorporated into this version. That term is vaguely defined in text, but is not defined in the glossary. And that's something that personally I think should be defined, particularly since vulnerability as an emotional state may or may not correlate to vulnerability in terms of actual likelihood of a poor outcome when using transportation systems. So that's my personal soapbox, and I'm happy to speak more to it, but I won't right now. Generally, if you look at the new plan, it should look fairly familiar, but in terms of content, but different in structure. One other thing of note is that we had talked about a policy that discussed roadway classifications and land use context, and I believe that policy was deleted and the roadway classification language was removed. And we were concerned about that, you may recall, because we thought it connected to levels of service or kind of refocused on vehicular traffic despite all the other goals, which were supposed to be centering other road users and not vehicular traffic. So anything else you think I should add here, Martin?
I think that's an excellent summary.
Great.
Thank you, Sam. I'm gonna spend just a couple of slides kind of going through some details about the regional plan itself. I think that will help provide a little bit of context for thinking about comments, as well as giving kind of an overall picture of how the regional plan gets used, assuming that it gets adopted. So this is we've used this for a long time. This is a planning pyramid illustration. And what it's telling us is that the regional plan at the bottom of the pyramid is aspirational and very general. So it sets a high-level vision and policies for the community on a variety of different topics. But it doesn't go into a whole lot of detail about how we achieve that vision or how we implement those policies. So it's really kind of telling us what direction we want to go at a very high level. The green in the middle are the documents that start to get into more detail. This is some of our specific plans and our topical plans. The active transportation master plan fits into that level. So one way to look at it is the regional plan has a lot of language that says essentially, aren't walking and biking really great for the community? We should do more of that. And that's really as far as it goes. So that's kind of pointing us in a direction to encourage walking and biking. It's really the active transportation master plan that tells us, all right, how do we do that? Like what specific steps do we need to undertake to actually make walking and biking more viable as transportation options? So that fills in some of that detail, but we're not done yet. The blue at the top is the things like the capital plan, engineering standards, the zoning ordinances that actually give us the teeth or the money or the ability to implement those things that we identified as what we need to do in the active transportation master plan. So we start kind of with a thought. Actually, we start down here and the pyramid goes up. We start down here with a thought, and that filters up to action. Does that help provide a little bit of the context? I know, like a lot of reviews of the regional plan want more information about how we're going to do these things. And in a lot of cases that the regional plan is going to stop short of telling us all of those details. And it really just sets us up for subsequent work. We're a little bit lucky in that we've already done that subsequent work through the active transportation master plan. Like we have that already in place. We still do have more work in that top blue one with adopting some engineering standards and zoning code that implements what we have in the ATMP. It's probably worth mentioning that the city is just now embarking with MetroPlan on a Safe Streets Master Plan. That also is a significant chunk of that green middle ground. So again, the regional plan gives us direction about how we want to tackle transportation. The Safe Streets Master Plan will give us all those details about the things that we need to do to implement a transportation system that meets the vision of the regional plan. Okay, enough on that. The regional plan actually has a fairly limited applicability once it's adopted. It does serve as our guide, kind of our vision and the direction that we take. But in terms of actual implementation, there's only a couple of scenarios where the regional plan comes into play. The first two are relate to private development. Actually, all three of them relate to private development, but the first two are when private development is proposed for a piece of property that doesn't have the correct zoning. So let's say you want to do an industrial park, but your land is zoned for residential use. You need to change the zoning of that property. When that's done, the regional plan is consulted to make sure that your development or your proposal to do an industrial park matches the land use categories that are in the regional plan and a few other things like the transportation network. If it doesn't, you need to go to the second category, which is to amend the regional plan to match what you want to do. In both those cases, there's a pretty thorough review of your proposal for an industrial park to make sure that it conforms to all the policies and the priorities of the regional plan. And And that those kind of developments only happen at most a handful of times every year. They are more infrequent than they are frequent. What happens more commonly is a development comes in and it already has the correct zoning for what they want to build. So say you want to build an apartment complex and your land is zoned HR, high density residential, you already have zoning entitlements to put up that project. In that case, you're not required to have any regional plan review. The only thing that we really check in that case is by virtue of the zoning code, we can check to see if there's a planned foots across your property, you're obligated to build it as part of your development. So that the foots map, in other words, in the regional plan becomes important. Because that indicates where we want foot trails to go. Our zoning code requires them to be built as part of private development. So sorry, sorry if that got a little bit technical, but that I just wanted to kind of use this to illustrate that this is really kind of the intent of the regional plan. It does provide kind of our overall policy direction, but this is where the rubber really hits the road where the regional plan is concerned. This is kind of a flow chart that illustrates what I just talked about. If you need a zoning map amendment, you're reviewed for conformity to the regional plan. If you don't have conformity, you have to do an amendment. If you do, then staff reviews it to make sure that you're hitting all the policies. For the regional plan itself, 1 to 2 are kind of introductory chapters that talk generally about what Flagstaff is, what it looks like, and how the regional plan gets used. 3 or 4 are really the policy sections that describe essentially this process. Chapters 5 through 11 are divided into however many topics that is, including transportation. And for the most part, those chapters are really just informational. They talk about best practices, how we achieve that vision, but they really don't come into play in terms of a document that is enforceable. So it's really just like good information on how to proceed. So when we look at the transportation chapter, which is number 6, that really is what it serves as, is just best practices, guidelines, good information. Here's a list of some of the things that are included in the regional plan. This is not everything, but it's kind of some of the things that help organize how we look at it. First off, priorities for the community, that they're divided into 2 classes, the core priorities, of which there are 2, and then 4 complementary priorities. Goals and policies, policy maps versus informational maps, a land use framework, as well as a transportation framework, guidelines, the topical chapters that I just referenced, 5 through 11, and then each of those chapters has action items. So we'll spend a little bit more time with each of those here in a moment. Here are the priorities. The 2 main ones are housing attainability and equity, and climate action. They're referred to as the core priorities. The complementary priorities are a walkable mixed-use community, natural and cultural resources, a healthy economy, and resilient public services and facilities. And again, this at one level, this gives us kind of, this is the community's priorities. This is our direction. That's kind of the overall level. At a more specific level, these are used to check new development proposals if they need to rezone. Okay, so just a little bit more detail about some of those components. Goals and policies include multimodal transportation policies and transportation systems. And I'll call it up here in a moment so we can take a look at them and actually review them. And then there's a few other ones that are relevant to transportation generally and bicycling specifically. Land use framework divides the community into centers, districts, landscapes, and neighborhoods. And we don't need to be too concerned about that, although there are guidelines for each one of these levels that include guidelines for circulation or transportation. We'll take a look at those. The transportation framework includes 3 building blocks: the street network, active transportation plans, and great streets and gateways. So active transportation plans, two were considered in the formation of the regional plan. One being the ATMP, the other being the regional trail strategy developed by Flagstaff Trails Initiative. And they're mainly reflected in a couple of maps. These are the policy maps. A little bit earlier, there was a slide that talked about policy maps and informational maps. Policy maps carry greater weight. And I gave the example before, but the urban trails map, if a trail is planned on the urban trails plan, the zoning code gives us the ability to require it as part of new development. That's really, really important. That is how we get a good part of our trail system implemented. What it means is that on the developer side, they have an obligation to build trails where we have them planned, or at least accommodate them. On the city side, we need to have a good trails plan to show what we want our future trail network to look like. In other words, we don't have the ability to make trails up as we go along. We have a master plan that we're working from. Some of these maps, we'll take a look at them, but some of these maps were adopted directly from the active transportation master plan, but not all of the maps that were in the ATMP were brought over to the regional plan. In the transportation chapter, we'll look for a moment at the high priority action items and other action items. These are recommendations from the regional plan on what we should do to implement its policies, and they aren't necessarily binding, but it's the thing that gives us what should we do next, answers that question. And I'm going to attempt to guide you through the regional plan document itself. Bear with me, this may get a little bit awkward. It's kind of a big document, and we're gonna have to like flip around a bunch. So if it gets a little dizzy, like going back and forth, I apologize. And if we don't do this very smoothly, I apologize, but I think we can get through it. So let me bring it up. Okay, so let's start with this is in chapter 3. These are our goals and policies. They're lettered and numbered. Here are the multimodal transportation goals and policies. Is this a sufficient size for you to see? Do you want it a little bit bigger? How about that?
Better.
Okay. So the goal is the region promotes a variety of affordable and accessible transportation modes to reduce reliance on single occupancy vehicles, reduce transportation costs for residents, and provide safe and convenient transportation options. I forget now if we mentioned this at the beginning, but if you see something that is worth talking about or commenting on as a potential comment from BAC, just jump in. Sound good? Anything that strikes you, just jump in. So MT1 is about intelligent transportation systems. I don't feel like that affects us directly as bicyclists, but correct me if I'm wrong. MT2A is improve the network connectivity and accessibility to surrounding and supporting local roads, collectors, and arterials to achieve lower VMT and improve the pedestrian, bike, and transit network. MT2B is really the equivalent policy, but for the county only. MT3 is reduce the need to commute to work and SOVs from outside the region by providing attainable housing, regional transit, and diverse commuting solutions. MT4, reduce the demand for driving and vehicle dependency, which reduces the cost of transportation, increases equity, and achieves carbon neutrality. MT5, increase the accessibility, connectivity, and use of pedestrian and bicycling infrastructure, including the foots and other trail systems as a critical element of a safe and livable community, and to promote transit access. This is kind of an important one for us. Anyone disagree with that sentiment? MT6 is about passenger rail with other travel modes, including the not downtown connection center for Mountain Line. MT7 is create curb management policies and programs to increase walkability and support activated streets and safety. Do you want to talk about what curb management is for a moment? Is everybody good in that concept? Talk about it. Everybody good?
You can talk about it for a
Maybe
moment.
briefly.
Okay.
Yeah. I had to look it up in the glossary.
Is it in the glossary?
It is in the glossary.
Okay.
I checked.
Curb management. Strategic planning and regulation of curbside space to balance the needs of various users such as delivery vehicles, public transportation, rideshare services, pedestrians, cyclists, and parking. So based on that, I would say an example of curbside management would be replacing a parking stall with a bike parking corral. Or space for scooters as part of scooter share. Or a thing like in front of Pay and Take, where there's like a restaurant's outdoor dining is built on kind of a barge in what used to be a parking space. Okay. I mean, sorry, this is where it gets awkward, but we'll go back to our MTs. So that's curb management. MT8, provide short and long-term bicycle parking in areas where bicyclists want to travel. I'll look ahead. We have decent regulations in the zoning code for short-term bicycle parking, like if you're going to the store or to a restaurant. We do not have very robust, if at all, requirements for long-term bicycle parking, which is could be, for example, if you work someplace and ride your bike and park it in a outdoor public parking space or indoor. It could be either. So you're parking it for the whole day. That's long term. Or if you live in a higher density development that you don't have a garage or space in your unit for a bike. These are like bike lockers, covered bike racks, a bike room, etc. For you to store your bike both securely and for long term, like that's where you keep it, basically. So, that's something that this policy gives us the support, but that's something that we need to work on at some point in the future. All right, any thoughts, comments, anything that you want to talk about in more detail that you think we need to express regarding these policies?
I'll just note real quick that short-term and long-term bicycle parking, that's one of the ones that we the BAC had discussed. That was previous draft that was added.
Okay, I'm going to move down to the other one that's kind of relevant is transportation systems. So we'll go through these quickly. TS1, prioritize safety and accessibility of vulnerable road users as the primary consideration in planning for streets and transportation systems. I'm going to let that sink in for a moment because that's a really big policy. Primary consideration, vulnerable road users. That's good. Okay, TS2 is work to achieve zero serious and fatal injuries on roads and streets in the region. That's it's essentially a Vision Zero goal. TS3A provide and maintain complete streets and systems with functional, comfortable, safe sidewalks, bicycle facilities, transit stops that provide accommodation for all users, even in temporary or interim conditions. That feels like a good one too. TS4 designed all streets to accommodate all people safely and where appropriate include art, contextual landscaping, head and bike and transit facilities, and appropriate architectural features. TS5 designed great streets to create cohesive and comfortable streetscapes that frame outstanding views, screen employment areas, and support multimodal transportation while moving regional traffic. We had some comments previously on the concept of great streets. And there's a section that we'll review in a moment that I think was added since your last review that talks a little bit more about great streets. Is that your read of it, Sam? Was that where the great streets kind of expanded on a little bit in that section?
I believe that they're defined now in the glossary. I think this section was moved. It used to be towards the beginning of the plan and they moved it into the transportation chapter, I think is basically
Okay.
it. Our comments last time, if folks recall, is essentially like the question we asked was, what are the criteria for making something a great street? Which streets are great? And I would say that the general answer was, we know a great street when we see a great street, or just we all know what they are. So it might be, I mean, I don't think it's a terrible concept, but I think it is vague. So worth looking at that section, I think.
Great streets are great.
Right.
Okay, the last one under this section is TS6, design gateways to promote a sense of arrival and a sense of place. Any comments? Does it look okay? Anything missing the point?
Yeah. I'll repeat my gripe here, which is that I think vulnerable road users should be defined in the glossary if they're going to be the primary consideration. And again, I think that's because anyone can feel vulnerable on the road, no matter what mode of transit they are using. And it would be helpful to clarify that vulnerable road users here is used in the context that it's used in other planning and policy documentation at the federal level, and maybe also at the state level. Martin, you would know better than I, to specifically refer to, again, non-motorists, pedestrians, bicyclists, people using wheelchairs, people using micromobility devices. I think I personally think it's really important to be clear about who vulnerable road users are if their needs are going to be prioritized. But this could be me being a lawyer's child, so if other people disagree, that's fine. Another thing I forgot to mention that I think is worth talking about, Martin, maybe you're going to, is that the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space goal also has an important goal in terms of bicycling, which is, I think, PROS 4, and relates to some of what you were talking about planning for future trails.
Okay. Do you want to talk for a moment about the vulnerable users? And then we can move on to the pros one.
Sure, I think we should define it. Like I said, I was looking around to see who has defined what a vulnerable road user is. Again, who constitutes a vulnerable road user. in this document, it's defined in text and it's based on a like aggregate study or several studies of people who may be vulnerable on the road. And I think it would be better to take a definition from like a transportation authority like the Federal Highway Administration or someone else like that, since it is a term that I believe is defined in federal policy. So that's my pitch. I can find the thing I'm looking for if people want to see it. Kim.
MetroPlan is working on a vulnerable road users study, if that helps for the region.
What definition are you using for vulnerable road users?
I believe it's the same thing as the federal, anything that's the federal government. So anyone that is not in a vehicle. But don't quote me because it's not my study and I'm not writing it. Mandia is.
Okay.
But I
We can,
believe that's.
is our draft online? We can look it up if it's available. Otherwise, we'll contact Mandy and see if she has something in the draft that defines it.
Well, you guys, I'll look it online. It's on our website. I'll look while you guys are doing this.
And I think Sam, just kind of build on what you said, that it's not defined in the glossary as vulnerable road users, and then there are a couple places where it's used in the document, the regional plan, to include a variety of disadvantaged populations, and I think that it feels like that's a really worthy thing to talk about. But I think VRU has a very particular meaning. I don't mean to ignore disadvantaged users. They are disproportionately affected by the changes to the transportation network. But when we're talking about VRU, that has a very specific context and meaning that it seems important to define with that context and meaning.
Yeah, I think in the in-text section too, there's some overlap in vulnerable road users. Like if I recall, that paragraph says something about people walking in low-income neighborhoods, but it also includes pedestrians, which people walking in low-income neighborhoods are, of course, pedestrians. So I can appreciate, as you said, Martin, that there's an attempt to also say, infrastructure is different and there are disparate outcomes in disparate communities. But I believe that it's also used to refer to like older adults, and older adults could be using any mode of transportation. A transportation policy that focuses on older adults, that could look a bunch of different ways. That's why I think it would be helpful to clarify what we're talking about.
Other Valerie.
I just want to clarify. I think I understand that at this point, we're probably not changing like big policy goal level things, but is that the kind of feedback they're looking for at this point? I don't want to, yeah, is that what they want?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Are we going to make another little suggestions document? Like Sam so graciously compiled last time?
I think ultimately it's up to you, but I think you can do that. Yes. If you want to, you can do that.
Okay. Just trying to transition this to like, concrete things. Can I suggest that is number one on our suggestion list?
I mean, I'm in favor of it.
Okay, cool. Write it
Do other
up.
folks from the BSC, have thoughts? Or about any of the other policies? Another thing we should say, which we did last time, is if there's anything in here in this draft or the previous draft that we really liked, I think it's also worth voicing that support to say, we appreciate this framing, we appreciate the inclusion of this policy, we agree with it. So. Other BAC folks, any opinions here?
Yeah, I support defining the vulnerable road users in our suggestions. And overall, like so far, based on what you've presented to us, I'm really liking a lot of the language that I see here.
Yeah, I also support it, and I think it looks wonderful. Thank you all for the hard work. I can see all the work you put into it.
Estella, any thoughts, not to single you out?
No, I've been following the conversation. I definitely support trying to define vulnerable road users, and I think it should align with how MetroPlan defines it in their plan. And just that we're consistent among the various planning efforts.
Awesome. And if folks didn't see, Carlton also put the map for where the great streets are in the chat if you want to look at where they are. We could also look at it in the document, but Martin, do you want to go to that one parks policy I mentioned? Just real fast while we're right by it. I think it's pros.
The first one?
I think it's pros 4, which is weirdly on a different page. There you go.
Sam, was this one was added or modified since the last
This
time?
is one that I have heard come up in conversation. Maybe y'all have heard about this too, in terms of access to public access points to trails. I don't know if folks here have heard, and I've heard it from a pretty diverse audience, including a bunch of NAU students, about some points in town by Little America that have been cut off, trails that have been cut off because of concerns from the landowner. So I don't recall if this one is changed, but this is something that I've heard other people bring up to say, it's really important, again, to do what this goal says, which is support and incentivize public access points and trail hubs for passive and active recreation, assuming that that definition includes mountain biking, bicycling for recreation, things like that on trails. If you have a different understanding of this policy, Martin, I would love to hear it, but.
The only additional thing it might mean is it may public access points may refer to the points where the community gets access to the forest or surrounding regional open space, like Observatory Mesa, McMillan Mesa, Picture Canyon. And we, in the active transportation master plan, we included a map of existing access points and planned access points as a way of helping to protect them and identify them, so we are working towards them and they don't get lost as development takes place. I think there have been some comments, maybe from FBO, about potentially including that map in the regional plan as kind of to make it kind of a policy document. Okay. Maybe the next thing to review would be the maps. So they are in chapter 4. Or did I go past them? Maybe we went past them. All right, hang on. We'll get there. All right, sorry about that. I thought they were closer. There's got to be an easier way to do that. Sorry to put you all through that. Okay, here's these are the policy maps that relate to transportation. 4.3 is the regional street network. 4.4 is the city scale. So this does two things. One, it shows us where planned roadways are located. And two, it assigns them by functional class from arterial down through collector. That's important for us because the designation as a collector or an arterial indicates what kind of bike facilities it will get. Here's the urban trails map. I'm going to ask you to hang on to this for a moment. I've got a couple of slides coming up that we can use to review. Or do you want to do that now? Let's look at the next map. This is the regional trails plan. So what it shows essentially is existing single track, and then any planned trails per the Flagstaff Regional Trail Strategy. This is the bikeways map. All it really illustrates is the hierarchy. So purple is primary, orange is secondary, blue is tertiary or third level, and it includes both existing roads and future planned roads. One map that wasn't carried over from the ATMP is the map that shows future bike facilities. So what are we planning? Bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, protected bike lanes, that sort of thing. Remains in the ATMP, but it's not carried over into this document. This map shows crossings. Orange circles are at-grade enhanced crossings. Purple squares are grade separated crossings. This is taken directly from ATMP.
Martin, I think Jen has a question.
Oops,
You're muted.
Jen.
Sorry. Putz trails. I don't know if I'm like going back before you want to go back, but looking at that map, that's only on city land. Putz trails never go on U.S. Forest Service land. Is that correct? I don't know.
Rarely. We have a couple. I'll show you where we have a couple planned just to make a connection, but they typically don't go onto Forest Service land.
Because looking at the proposed Futz trails and then also the proposed like single track trails, I didn't see that connection from Eldon Lookout that takes you to the east side. And I know that like the Forest Service wrote that grant last spring. And in my opinion, that's an important connector.
I think they call that the Mount Eldon Base Trail. Is that right?
That makes sense to me, but I don't know.
Okay. One other map that didn't get transferred over from the ATMP to the regional plan is we had a map that showed single track connecting trails that provide like links between the foot system and Forest Service trails. And it didn't show neighborhood trails, neighborhood connecting trails, which is like really short things that go from maybe one street to the next street. Or an example is a lot of people walk from Lockett, where the bus stop is, down to King Street to access the health department. And we have an easement for a sidewalk or a pedestrian facility, but there are no facilities. So people end up walking across the east end of the community college. So that we identified a neighborhood connector there to provide a way for people to do that without having to cut across a parking lot. So those two kind of categories of trails or connectors didn't get copied over into the regional plan. They're still, again, they're still in the ATMP. They're in a planning document, but just not on the regional plan. We'll go back to in the Foots map in a moment, but do you have any comments, questions, suggestions, things to talk about on the other maps? All right, let me go back. So since this is on the Foots map, and I'll go through these slides and we'll see the changes that were made, and then we'll go back to the map itself and take a look at it. So in general, we've had a Foots plan in the regional plan document since 1988. That document was called the Growth Management Guide 2000 because in 1988, 2000 seemed like a long ways in the future. Now, of course, we know that was 25 years ago. Anyway, there's been a Foots plan in those documents in every successive regional plan. I think there's been like 3 or 4 since 1988. In this particular draft, a couple modifications were made since the last time you saw that. One is that future trails, that is, are now color coded by the status of property rights. So I believe if we have property rights, they're in purple, and if we don't have property rights, they're in orange. And just for reference, many of our planned trails don't have property rights. We work on that as part of the implementation of those trails. The second change is that on parcels of 400 acres or more, so very large property owners, the trails have been generalized to show to be really less distinct, to not show a specific alignment. And then third, a disclaimer has been added indicating that trail alignment is conceptual. So we're just showing something very general. When a development comes in, the alignment will be determined at that time. Those changes were made generally in response to private property concerns that when trails are shown in the regional plan as planned trails, it leads to trespass and unauthorized trail creation. Second, the claim was made that use of unauthorized trails leads to some of the problems with illegal camping and transients on private property. I will say that neither of these claims have been verified. They're just, that this was made by private property. In response, the city made the changes that we saw on the slide before. So understanding that, let's go back to the Foots map. And so here it's a dark purple are existing trails. As I mentioned, where we have private property rights, where we have rights to build a trail, they're shown as purple. Where we don't have rights, they're shown as orange. And where planned trails cross private parcels of more than 400 acres, they're shown as this kind of generalized line. If we like zoomed in on it, actually is a polygon. So I'll just give you an example. This line right here is intended to follow the canyon at the bottom of the Bone Arrow Wash. But it's sort of generalized. This one is intended to follow, this one is intended to follow the Rio to Flag, et cetera. I mentioned before that this map becomes important when development is proposed because the zoning code gives us the ability to require any of these planned trails as part of private development, as long as they're shown on this map. I think these generalized areas will still give us the ability to do that. Like this is, kind of at this scale, it almost looks like a line. So this indicates a trail connection. It will give us less ability to kind of dictate to the private property owner how that trail is to connect if we had ideas about what the alignment would look like. I'll just go ahead and ask directly. Is it something that you think we want to comment on or bring up for more discussion?
Jen, I defer to you as resident trails person.
I mean, what are our options here?
You could make a suggestion that they be depicted differently. Historically, we've just had a solid line for existing trails and a dash line for proposed trails. I think the Open Space Commission had suggested some language to include with the disclaimer that kind of gave direction on making trail alignments part of the development. So don't push them off to the side. Don't align trails along roads. Make them kind of an integral part of a development. So they're an amenity, so that they create greenways within a development. So they're accessible to people within the development. So it's part of the development, really. I mean, think about where we have existing trails. We don't think of those areas as developments. We think of them as neighborhoods. So a development is only a development while it's going through the approval process. Once it's built and people live in it, it's a neighborhood. So what do we want neighborhoods to look like? How do we want trails to interact with neighborhoods? All those people that live in those future neighborhoods, like what would they expect of a trail system in their neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I value something that's enjoyable and also connects to other neighborhoods.
The connectivity, yep. We always think that trail experience is important. Trails aren't just getting from point A to point B, but how you do that is important. So are you going through natural areas? Is there landscaping? Are you buffered from streets or parking lots or buildings? Getting from point A to B can be like just a practical exercise, or it can be something that is actually enjoyable. And I think the success of our trail system relies on our trails being something that people enjoy using. So you're using them for transportation, but they're also appealing. You could use them for recreation just as easily, for example.
And do these like polygons change that or make that so that developers would be less likely to be required to do those things?
I think that by virtue of being on this map, we'll still have the right to require them as part of development. Just based on the map, we may have less to say about where the alignment goes or what it looks like. Again, the regional plan won't do all the work for us. It probably would be beneficial for us to think about creating guidelines or standards for how trails connect through developments to make them a meaningful part of that neighborhood. The regional plan can kind of support us in that effort by giving us kind of that policy support. So I don't want
So
to,
do you think
go ahead.
the map is the most effective tool for that, or do you think written policy would be, statement would be equally as effective or more effective?
Probably written policy, really.
Okay. Since I know slides to show us, you were mentioning you wanted to jump back, and I suggest that maybe discuss further what we might want to suggest be included in terms of activity next week. Or will that come up further now?
There are a couple skips in your comment, but what I heard was, can we think about can we bring something back to the meeting next week?
Yep.
Okay.
Or do you want to talk about it now?
Up to you ultimately, but I think it would be fine to bring it back next week.
Okay. BAC folks, how would you feel about taking a closer look at the maps and then any written policy around trails and trail access and connectivity ahead of next week?
That sounds good with me.
Okay. Do we maybe at this point, Sam, we can cut to the comment response?
As I mentioned before, Martin, I don't know if you thought any of these were particularly important. When I was reading through the responses, or the general feedback was that the change we were interested in was too specific, or was better suited for a programmatic plan.
We missed the first part of that, or at least I did. Sorry about that.
Yeah. No, I think it's my mic. I think I mentioned before that most of our comments were either addressed or it was that they were too specific for this document.
Okay, so did anybody else? I feel like I missed a part of that. That was important.
Yeah, were you just saying that you think that pretty much everything was covered here? Like they either made the changes or they thought our recommendations were too specific to be included in this plan? Was there anything else? That's good. Okay.
Okay. So, okay, sorry about that. So we may not need to go through this in as much detail as we thought. Was that the main point?
That was my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, if people want to read it for next week, they can, I would say.
Okay. In that case, let's go back to the PowerPoint. Just look at what we were going to review. So goals and policies. Let's go back to the guidelines and transportation framework. And we looked at the policy maps and we looked at the previous concept comment review. So let's take a look at the guidelines real quickly, the transportation framework and the action items. Okay, so under the land use guidelines, one of the building blocks is centers. And one of the categories under that is an urban center. So for an urban center, these are the guidelines. For connectivity, these are the specific guidelines. So for an urban center, connectivity should be designed based on gridded streets, develop high pedestrian bicycle transit connectivity via the street network, and enhanced with dedicated facilities, and provide access and services through sidewalks and alleys. So these are repeated in other types of centers and landscapes and neighborhoods. I will say generally they are at about this level of specificity, which is really, really pretty general. Does anybody disagree with the notion that we should have develop high pedestrian, bicycle, and transit connectivity within an urban center? I think that's generally about as detailed as it's going to get. Again, this is one of those cases where they leave it to subsequent documents or efforts to fill in some of the details. Do you all want to spend some time looking through them? Or do you want to skip on to the transportation building blocks and going to skip over this part? Here we can call up another one. This is for a suburban corridor. The guidance is develop high quality, accessible ped, bike, and transit facilities on or parallel to streets. Again, fairly general. I think most of the other guidelines kind of are of similar wording and specificity or generality.
Yeah, I mean, unless I'm missing something, I like the sound of that.
We want to argue with that?
No, yeah, definitely not argue with that, but and you don't have to write down this comment, but I just wish the photos actually showed what we mean. I just find they're buildings, which this is about connectivity, and yeah, that'd just be one comment, but yeah.
Okay, let's look at this is also in chapter 4. This is a transportation framework. It has 3 building blocks. One is the street network, and it really just describes the map that we looked at for existing and future streets and their functional class. The second building block is active transportation. As I mentioned, they refer to 2 plans that are existing, the ATMP and the Flagstaff Regional Trail Strategy. And then a few of the maps were carried over from those documents into the regional plan. And then the last one is great streets and great gateways. And I won't read it, but I'll give you a moment to just peruse that description.
So on that map that Carlton shared with us that has the great streets, those are like future great streets? Because like the definition of great streets is we just know they're great. And I wouldn't say that those streets that are highlighted I would consider great. at this point.
Yeah, this might be the irrelevant statement. The corridors identified on the map currently lack all the attributes of a grade street that have been
Okay, I'll just
identified
read
as
the whole
having
thing.
potential. So in other words, they're the streets that are shown are not great yet, but they have potential. I mean, it feels to me like this is one of those things that there is some work done subsequent to the regional plan to make great streets, to implement great streets. Like there's some work we have to do. What does it take to make a street great? If it's not great yet, how do we get there?
In an
Okay.
earlier comment, I started making a lot of great streets comments and kind of got, we'll do that later kind of thing, just like what Martin's saying. It might be a later effort that we could be like a sub-plan, a great streets sub-plan or something like that later. So
Martin, do you think with there's a forthcoming Safe Streets Master Plan, right? Is it important for the regional plan to reference that forthcoming plan?
It does. We'll see that in the action plan.
Okay.
Or the action items, I should say. So this is chapter
Perfect.
6. Again, this is kind of the text part of the document. So it has a lot of information and ideas and suggestions for how we move forward with transportation, but it's not necessarily policy or binding. It's just kind of information. This section does include, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, like read through it, and if you have any comments, we can certainly, bring them up. But it's less applicable to, it's not necessarily in all the stuff that's going to get implemented. Here are the action items listed in the transportation section. They're divided into high priority and other action items, and we'll just take a quick look at them. There are 3 high priority. One is looking at better ways to do snow removal. Number 2 is referencing the transportation master plan. So complete a master plan that's listed as short term. That's the Safe Streets Master Plan. That's where it kind of gives us that direction. And then the third one is establish rural transit service. Basically, we get tons of comments all the time about people want bus service out to Mountain Air, Kachina Village, Donny Park, et cetera. So this is addressing that. Other action items increase the number of grade separated railroads and interstate crossings. This hyperlink goes to the definition. So a grade separated is a ped and bike tunnel or bridge, basically. Update subdivision code and engineering standards to improve network connectivity and accessibility for all travel roads. So I think the sentiment here is making sure that we have adequate rules for connectivity between neighborhoods. Typically what happens is one subdivision will build on one parcel, and they may include one road connection to the next parcel. And in a lot of cases, that isn't really adequate for connectivity. And that's for streets, and for ped and bike access, it's really the same. So can we have standards that talk about what level of connectivity is needed between neighborhoods? Fund, incorporate needs of ITS. Plan, evaluate the use of intelligent transportation systems. Collaborate on integrating ITS, so 3 related to just intelligent transportation systems. Next one, develop better multimodal evaluation tools for a traffic impact analysis. TIAs are something we use on new development. So it's an attempt to measure their traffic impact in the interest of requiring them to mitigate their traffic impact. And generally it refers to cars. So for example, if a new development goes in and there's enough vehicle traffic that we need a right turn lane, will require a right turn lane. The problem or the dissatisfaction with that is it's just about cars and building. The mitigation is always building more capacity for cars, and it doesn't take into account people walking, biking, or taking transit. So A, can we recognize that transportation impact can be mitigated by walking, biking, and transit? And can we get development to enhance walking, biking, and transit to mitigate their transportation impacts? Next one, city code set consistent standards and processes for transit. Partner with Mountain Line. Continue to fill in sidewalk gaps, create new ped and bike crossings. Create wayfinding and other sign design standards. Here related to curb management. We could use this for, our foot trails and our bikeways, for example, and sidewalks. Update traffic rules and devices for micromobility. Account for all users, including peds and bikes during roadway operations, maintenance, storage, and snow operations. I'm not quite sure what storage refers to here.
I wonder if it meant to be snow storage.
Maybe. What do we store on roadways? I don't know. Maintain streets, ped paths, bikeways, foot trails in good condition, free of snow and debris, obstructions. And then the last one is pursue opportunities for public trailheads and linking urban trails. Again, the meaning of this is just kind of a suggested to-do list on how to implement the plan. A lot of these things we have either underway or we're planning on them, but it's good to get the support in this document to move forward.
And then Martin, wasn't the first or the second one the engineering standards for, I think it had connectivity, and you said that could include trails. Would that be the policy that we're looking for the future trails map? Or the standards that developers would be required to follow?
It could be part of it. I think we probably need to expand upon that concept, though. I think my read of this is that they're talking about like how many points of connectivity do you need between two adjoining developments or through one larger development. So I think that's part of it. Like how many connections do you need to a regional trail, for example? But we would expand upon that to address greenways and things like that.
Got it.
Okay, I think that's about kind of all we had in mind to look at specifically in the document and to review. And we're right about at 6 o'clock. We will do a little bit of work on the things that we talked about and bring back some maybe more specific suggestions for the meeting on the 18th, which is next week. In the meantime, based on what we talked about tonight, if anything occurs to you or you look at the document again and think of something new, just bring it to the meeting next time. And I imagine we can, have time to talk about it and incorporate it into the comments as appropriate.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Martin, do you need me to close the meeting?
Yeah.
All right.
That's your prerogative.
Then I will adjourn us at 5:57 and see you all next week.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks all. Have a good night.
Yep.
Night.
Hey, Martin,
Thanks.
can you save the meeting chat? Because Val added a comment in there.
Yeah, it'll save it. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. As long as you
Thank
have
you,
that.
Sam.
For sure. See you. Anything else you need before I leave?
No, you got it. Thank you.
All right. See you next week.